Welcome to our final installment of our journey through Exodus. We are doing Exodus 14. It is the classic and epic scene where the Israelites are being led through the Red Sea. What we're going to do today is by looking at the passage, instead of breaking it up into meaning blocks like we usually do, I'm simply going to mark those passages with different colors and see how God's plan is being fulfilled, not by looking for the places in the story where there is tension, like we usually do, or where there is a comment by the author or anything like that. God does certain or makes certain promises in the beginning of this story, and he brings those promises to fulfillment at the end. So we're going to mark those instances where he is speaking, where he's promising, and see how that all works together in order for him to achieve his plan. So the very first thing that we see God does is he says he will harden Pharaoh's heart. Now this is a theme that comes quite way back in Exodus, but this time he hardens his heart for a purpose, that he will pursue them. This is part of God's plan. So he directs the Israelites to, it seems like they are wandering in the wilderness without particular direction, and then is in a dead end. And then God says he will harden Pharaoh's heart and they will pursue him. And again in verse 5, Pharaoh and his officials changed their mind, exactly what God has said. Now that change of mind is from, okay, I'll let them go, to hardening their hearts and pursuing them again, wanting their slaves to come back. Again in verse 8, the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites. So exactly what God promised will happen has happened. Now the question is why? Why does God want this particular event to happen? Why does he want Pharaoh to pursue? And here is the answer. I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army. It is God's name and his glory that is on display here. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So two things he wants to achieve through this act: to gain glory for himself through Pharaoh, and that the Egyptians will know that the Lord Yahweh is the true God, not any of their idols, not any of their gods that they are worshipping. So we'll see how he achieves that, but also what it does to the Israelites on their way. And this is where we get to verse 10. The Pharaoh hardens his heart, he chases after and pursues the Israelites, and he takes and he gets right behind them. And when the Israelites see this, their faith is tested, and they are terrified, and they cry out. They have reached a dead end. The Pharaoh is right on their heels, and they are so terrified actually that they accuse Moses. They say to him, was it because there was no graves in Egypt that you brought us out to die in the desert? What have you done to us by bringing us out? As if they never wanted to be here. In verse 12, didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Now these words you will not find in any of the writings. It's as if they've made up those words on the spot. They created a lie, but to pass the responsibility back to Moses' shoulders alone. So what God is testing them here is he is truly testing their faith, their trust in his name, that he will deliver. And clearly they are failing, as they will fail many times to come as well. But this is the very first time that God is showing them that walking with him is going to be not as easy as they thought, but that their faith will be tested and tested all the time. But then Moses gives them a fantastic answer, a promise. And this is a very classic answer that Moses gives them to say in chapter 14, verse 13, do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Moses knows and realizes that the problems that they have, the challenges to actually be set free from their slavery and bondage, is far too big for the Israelites to carry. So they have to, the only thing that they can do is to trust in God. And for the rest of the story, we are going to see how God does that, how God will fight for the Israelites. Now here's a repetition of what God is going to do to gain glory for himself. So the blue markers will indicate things that God does that will gain glory for himself, because that is his aim. He will gain glory for himself and the Egyptians will know his name. But what is he going to do to achieve that? And here in chapter 14, verse 16, we see the first of these very strong, epic, miraculous acts of God. He says to Moses, raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the waters so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. That will be his first and most spectacular act of salvation to achieve the glory for himself, and that the Egyptians will know who he is. Then the same kind of repetition. God promises that he will harden Pharaoh's heart, and here he does it again in verse 17. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, so they will go after them. And why does he do that? Same thought. The only reason he hardens the Egyptians' heart is so that it will lead to glory, and that the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord, and therefore I will gain glory through Pharaoh. It is God's name that is on the block here. He wants to gain glory for himself because he deserves the glory. At the moment, Pharaoh wants all the glory for himself. The Egyptians have no idea that all the glory should go to God and God alone. And here again, as the green markers indicate, here is a promise to stand firm. God will fight for you. And now we start seeing how God is fighting for them. And we're going to mark all of the things in green that displays God's acts. The angel of God, who had been traveling in front of the Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. Why did he go behind them? Because the Egyptians are there. That is where the fight is, and God is going to fight for them. The second thing that happens is that the pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them. God is now not only instructing them what to do, but he is actively with them and fighting for them. Throughout the night, and here's the third act where God is fighting for them. Throughout the night, the cloud brought darkness to the one side, obviously where the Egyptians are, and light to the other side. So neither went near the other all night long. This is a miraculous event. And it's a clear indication that God is now fighting for them. Darkness and light throughout the whole Bible has always been a reflection of the place and the attitude towards God. If you are an enemy of God, you are in darkness. If you are sons and daughters of God, you are in the light. And here it's very clear that God is showing who his enemy is and who he has chosen to be his people through this miracle. Verse 21 says, Then Moses stretched out his hand, and that massive event happened. The Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided. God is fighting. He is making a clear way. And with a wall on water on their right and their left, a spectacular moment in history. Verse 24, During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the armies, at the Egyptian army, and threw it into confusion. It doesn't say how it does that, but there's no way that an army can operate successfully if there's confusion, if there's not a clear line of authority. And clearly this is what has happened. Together with that, the next thing he does in fighting for them is he jammed the wheels of their chariots so that they had difficulty driving. Maybe the ground started getting wet, or maybe the bearings ceased, or whatever the case may be. Why does he do this? All the blue marking says it is to gain glory for himself, and so that the Egyptians will know that he is the Lord. And here is the fulfillment of what God has been planning for it to happen anyway. And here, for the first time, the Egyptians declare that the Lord is fighting for Israel. It says, let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord, Yahweh, and they use his name, is fighting for them against Egypt. So we see here that what God wanted to achieve, that the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord, has now happened. They realize, and God has successfully achieved his purpose. Another thing that happened in order to gain glory for God and to show that he is fighting for the Israelites is that the Lord swept the Egyptians into the sea. He closed the sea again over them, and they were overwhelmed. The Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That is the repetition of the most miraculous thing that the Red Sea crossing is talking about. And here, God fulfills the second of his purposes, to gain glory for himself. And listen to how he has achieved that, and how the Israelites acknowledge that fact. When the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses his servant. If God has gained glory for himself, that is the only response to a glorious God, that people fear the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses his servant. May we gain much insight into the character, the glory, the might of God. It is the same God that has split the ocean into two, that has also raised Christ from the dead. It's the same power that raised Christ from the dead, and that act of salvation on the cross gains God's more glory and reveals more of his majesty and his power. And for that, we as people should also fear the Lord reverently and put our trust in him and in his servant, Jesus Christ.